Ancient biblical prophets wrote about the future. Today, theologians are poring over those scriptures with a firm belief that their prophecies are coming to pass. Journey now into the world of eschatology on Prophecy in the News with author and lecturer J.R. Church.
Gary Stearman has written an article for our October 2007 magazine called The Days of Noah. Are They Here? I especially like his subtitle, The Advent of Alien Technology. It's going to be a fascinating program today as we discuss with Gary Stearman his article here on those ancient angels who came down and taught men things that they shouldn't be learning. Gary?
Well, J.R., this is the first of perhaps several articles on this subject. It's biblical in scope. When you mention alien technology, you might be thought to be talking about science fiction. You might be thought to be talking about some New Age imagination. We're taking our texts from the Bible. We're examining what the Bible has to say, and we're trying to shatter modern myth, J.R. There is a modern myth that we all sprang from cavemen, Neanderthals, Cro-Magnons, all of those guys that used to run around in animal skins and carry clubs.
Yes.
And we are supposed to be ascended from the cavemen. And first they learned to sharpen sticks and make fire, and then they learned to make arrowheads and up and up and up. That was their technology. Well, the Bible differs greatly from that narrative. The Bible tells us that, in fact, humanity is descended from superior men. And the first of those superior men was Adam himself.
Adam named all the animals.
He did.
So he had to be intelligent. And God came down and visited with him in the cool of the evening. I don't know how long this went on. We don't know exactly when Adam and Eve sinned against God and were basically kicked out of his animal preserve called the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. But there was a garden. It was a perfect place, and Adam and Eve were kicked out of it. We don't know exactly when. But Gary, when he was about 450 years old, according to these ancient sources you've cited here, mm-hmm. fallen angels came down to Mount Hermon and began to teach men alien technology. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Alien technology. And we're talking about technology such as those things having to do with the management of agriculture, the forging of advanced metals, metallurgy. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read from the book of Enoch, chapter 8, starting in verse 1. And again, I want to caution that we don't read this the way we read the Bible. This is not canonized scripture. But it does provide us a history of sorts. And Jude, of course, quotes from the book of Enoch. And we have here a fallen angel named Azazel. That's an interesting name. Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, the use of antimony, and the beautifying the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and coloring tinctures. We're talking chemistry here, mm-hmm. and metallurgy. And the next verse says, and there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication. They were led astray and became corrupt in their ways. And then we have another angel called Semyaza. He fell, and he taught men enchantments and root cuttings and the resolving of enchantments. So we have another angel named Barachiel, who taught astrology, and another angel, Kokabel, who taught the names of the constellations, and another angel named Ezekiel. Now, it wouldn't be the same as Ezekiel, the prophet, taught the knowledge of clouds, the signs of the earth, the signs of the sun, Sariel, the course of the moon. J.R., you could read and read, but I'll stop right there. It's very clear that Enoch believed that these fallen angels came down and gave man forbidden knowledge.
Now, we call that science today.
Yes, we do.
We look at the nightly news. They can tell us when the clouds are coming, when bad weather is coming. They chart, the various weather patterns around the world. Mm-hmm. We would not regard that as as forbidden knowledge today.
No, we wouldn't.
Why was it back then?
Because, J.R., the more we read, the more we discover that that forbidden knowledge was also coupled with forbidden power. Power that has since been lost, I believe, in the flood of Noah. This brings us to a myth, but I think it's a myth with historical roots. The Greeks talk about a god named Prometheus. In Greek, the word Prometheus means forethought, someone who takes thought and then does something. Well, Prometheus is the god who brought fire to man. Supposedly, he took a fennel stalk, he went up into the regions of heaven, and he set that stalk afire with heavenly fire. He stole that fire, he put it inside of his garment, and he came back down to earth, and he gave it to man. Now, this was not just the kind of fire we think of when we think of campfire or a stick on fire. This was fire that provided some kind of power. It was a power not only scientific or chemical or physical, but it was also metaphysical. That is, it seems to be associated with the ability to do supernatural things, the fire of the gods. And for this, Prometheus was severely punished by Zeus. He didn't want that fire to be stolen and taken down to earth. Prometheus was strapped to the top of the mountains. By the way, these are the Caucasus Mountains, the border between east and west, where an eagle would come down every day and feast on his liver, inflicting much pain. And his liver would grow back, and the next day the eagle would come back and do the same thing over and over and over again. The punishment for having stolen fire from the gods and brought it to man. J.R., there's war in heaven. The Greeks talked about it. Enoch talked about it. The Bible talks about it. It goes on to this day.
War in heaven.
War in heaven.
A fascinating part that I have noticed in the book of Matthew, when Jesus said, "No man knoweth the day nor the hour, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." And to me, this says that this time schedule that God has, that man does not know about it, because God has reserved the key ingredient to the knowledge of the end of days, not only from man, but also from the angels.
Yes.
Because if the angels had known why Jesus came the first time, for the purpose of dying for the sins of the world, he would never have had entered into Judas Iscariot and betrayed Jesus and saw to it that Jesus was crucified. Because he actually stumbled over his own ignorance and did the will of God. Therefore, Lucifer could not have known what was going on.
There is plotting, planning. There is point and counterpoint. Just following the verse J.R. read about no man knowing the day or the hour of Christ's coming, it says in verse 37 of Matthew 25, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And let's talk about the days of Noah, because, J.R., you can take a very simplistic view about Noah, who built a wooden boat and sailed off to safety at the instruction of God. Or you can actually go back and try to find historical evidence about what the days of Noah were really like. Josephus, for example, talks about the days of Noah this way. He says, "For many angels of God accompanied with women, and begat sons that proved unjust and despisers of all that was good, on account of the confidence that they had in their own strength. For the tradition is that these men did what resembled the acts of those whom the Grecians call giants." So here we have Josephus acknowledging Greek myth as a certain form of reality. Now, J.R., Greek myth doesn't come to us perfect. It's been, it has been, shall we say, muddied and muddled over the years and fictionalized, exaggerated. But there's enough there so that we can say that something happened. What was it that happened?
Well, it had to be what Enoch was describing there. Enoch is not the first one who wrote about this. In Genesis chapter 6, we are told that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took wives. Gary, that was illegal for those angels to do
Absolutely.
that. They created a problem with the human genome. And when, when Adam was around 450 years old, those angels came down. And for the last 500 years of Adam's life, Adam had to contend with these angels and watch his progeny move away from the worship of the one true God and create disasters. In fact, Noah, according to the book of Enoch there, Noah had to leave town.
Yes.
He had to leave the area where he was king. He was the seventh from Adam. He was a king. He was the 10th from Adam. Enoch was the seventh. But Noah was, supposed to be the anointed king, ruler of the earth. He was of the royal lineage of Adam, and he was the direct descendant, so to him was supposed to fall the rule over this planet. But he was deposed. Because of these fallen angels and corrupted the genome, he was not accepted as the king. He had to leave town. In fact, it appears to me then that he probably lived around Mount Hermon, and then he and his family had to leave and go east over to the Mesopotamia Valley, where he and his sons built the ark that was to save humanity.
I don't think it's accidental that Jesus included these words. For those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, who have spiritual leading, I think we are led to try to understand what the days of Noah were really like so that we would know what it was going to be like in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. And JR, I believe, based upon what we're seeing today, that there is another invasion from heaven, similar to the one in the days of Noah, in which the fallen ones are coming back again and preparing for the time we call the tribulation, when they'll cause no end of harm on earth. Now, this article that we're talking about is in the October 2007 Prophecy in the News magazine, where we have much more detail than we can talk about here today. JR is going to tell you how you can get your own copy of Prophecy in the News.
Just call the phone number at the bottom of your screen and ask for it. It's the October 2007 edition of Prophecy in the News. The days of Noah, are they here? You can read all about it. I would like to encourage you to subscribe for the next year. To me, the next 12 months are going to be very exciting months, because this is the sabbatical year in Israel and in the Jewish calendar. And so if you will subscribe for a year to Prophecy in the News magazine, I want to send you 4 books. The books that we have authored and published: Hidden Prophecies in the Song of Moses, The Mystery of the Menorah, Guardians of the Grail, and They Pierced the Veil and Saw the Future. These 4 books, a $48 value, I'll send them to you for free. Absolutely free, is our way of saying thank you for subscribing to Prophecy in the News magazine for 1 year. The subscription price, $34.95. That will include the cost of mailing these books to you. So call today, will you? Call the phone number at the bottom of your screen and order Prophecy in the News. And if you'd like to read this article, be sure and mention to the operator when you call to subscribe that you want to begin with the October 2007 issue. We'll be glad to send it to you. Gary?
The Greeks had a myth. It was the myth of Atlantis, as preserved by Plato, and in a dialogue called the Critias. And I'm holding here the Critias, and I want to read from the Critias concerning the city of Atlantis. And JR, this is just to show that even the Greeks had some, although muddled and confused understanding of what the Bible talks about as Noah's flood. Nevertheless, they had their own historical memory of this event. Plato writes, as for the city itself, that's Atlantis, it was laid out at the time in the plan that I will now describe. First of all, the Acropolis was very different than it is now. A single night of torrential rain stripped the Acropolis of its soil and reduced it to bare limestone in a storm that was accompanied by earthquakes. Before the destructive flood of Deucalion, this was the third such cataclysmic storm. Without reading the rest, Plato then goes on to describe the storm that ultimately destroyed Atlantis. It rained without ceasing. the ocean whipped up, earthquakes happened, and Atlantis sank into the sea. Now, does this sound familiar to you, having read the Bible?
The flood of Noah.
Yes.
It has to be what he's talking about there.
Yes.
And even though Plato said it was some 9,000 years ago, he
Right.
got this information from other people.
Yes.
And you know how people are prone to exaggerate, especially the Greeks.
Especially the Greeks.
You know, it was Flavius Josephus who said Herodotus is the father of lies. That's what he said.
Yes, that's true.
And of course, the Greeks said he was the father of his history. He was the one who tells us about the ancient past. Well, Josephus had other ideas about it. The neat thing about the Jewish historians is they did not allow themselves to exaggerate. The
Yes.
Bible, the Bible historical portions are accurate.
The books of Moses, in fact, and I'm convinced that the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, are letter perfect in their historical accuracy, right down to every jot and tittle, as it was put later on.
Well, let's talk about Atlantis for a few
Okay.
minutes and what happened there.
Now, Atlantis, fascinating that according to Plato, again in the dialogue known as the Critias, he writes this. He says, "So it was that Poseidon," now Poseidon was the god of the sea, "received as one of his domains the island of Atlantis, and he established dwelling places for the children that he had fathered of a mortal woman, in a certain place on the island that I shall describe." He then goes on to describe the mother and father of this woman, the daughter. Her name was Cleito. He joined with her in some kind of matrimony. They became husband and wife. It says he sired 5 pairs of twin sons and raised them to manhood. He gave each of his sons names. To the son who was oldest and king, he gave the name which the entire island and the surrounding sea derived their names, because he was the first of the kings of that time. His name was Atlas. The island is called Atlantis, and the sea the Atlantic, and they were supposedly, according to Plato, named after Atlas. Now, here's the theme. a God comes down, marries a human woman, has 10 children, and the eldest, Atlas, becomes the keeper of this island called Atlantis. This reminds me so much of what we see in Genesis 6.
Genesis chapter 6. It's absolutely right on target, Gary. So the story in Genesis chapter 6 has to be absolutely true. The story by Plato about Atlantis could be a confabulation, it could be an exaggeration, but there's a seed of truth in it.
Yes.
That angels came down and cohabited with humans somewhere around the 450th year of Adam and Eve, and for the last 500 years of Adam's life corrupted the human race and created this thing called idolatry, destroying the human genome, the perfection that Adam had, and creating giants or monsters or monstrosities, perhaps even among the animals, because God had to destroy everything except that which Noah took aboard the ark. Everything else had to go.
Now you remember Semyaza, this fallen angel, according to Enoch, came down and gave men the art of metallurgy. This is backed up very interestingly in the Critias of Plato, where he talks about the race of Atlas. He says it increased greatly, it became greatly honored. We are given a great description of the city of Atlantis, which, by the way, sounds highly technological. It had power sources, it had strange vehicles that were able to move under their own power. And let me read one sentence here. And in many regions of the island, they exploited that metal, which is now only a name to us, but which was more than a name, orichalcos. And this orichalcos, which is an unknown metal, which the gods brought to men, apparently had energy associated with it. It had some kind of an intrinsic energy that powered the city of Atlantis. And he says in that age it was valued only less than gold itself. And let me turn the page here and read another sentence about orichalcos. He said the interior of that of the wall, that is the wall of Atlantis, they invested with the metal tin. And the wall surrounding the Acropolis they invested with orichalcos, which glittered like darting fire. This strange unknown metal had fiery properties, and it reminds me of that god who stole fire and brought it down
Prometheus.
to mankind. Prometheus.
How about that?
JR, what can I say? This is an exciting study because Jesus said these things are going to begin to happen again as the days approach.
Yeah. Now, if you think all of this is just the confabulation of an ancient Greek philosopher, let me remind you that there are a few things around on the planet Earth today that remind us of a pre-flood environment. And let's talk about Machu Picchu down in Peru for a few moments, Gary, and tell us about the silver located in the museum there.
Oh, yes, as a matter of fact, the city of Machu Picchu in Peru, very high up in the mountains, is made of cut stone. And it's thousands of years old. And the stones, which are intricately cut, perhaps you've seen pictures of it. In fact, we may find one to put on the screen for you. JR, these stones are so intricately cut and fitted that you can't even put a sheet of paper in the cracks between the stones after all these years. No one knows how they were done. Some of these stones weigh thousands of tons. There's a museum at Machu Picchu that has ancient silver work. And it's not a museum that's open to the public. I know an individual who was allowed to visit it. It's full of silver statuary and castings. The silver is thousands of years old, and it does not corrode. It is not like most silver that develops a black surface. It stays shiny, and no one knows the metallurgical process by which it was formed, but it is said to have been formed literally thousands of years ago by an unknown group of people.
Amazing. So here we have silver that does not tarnish.
Right.
And that has to be some kind of technology that predates the kind of technology we have today. It can't be done today, can it?
Neither can a pyramid be rebuilt today, for example. Neither could the Baalbek Acropolis be rebuilt today. The flooring stones in the Baalbek Acropolis are so large they couldn't be handled by any piece of machinery now in existence.
Baalbek, of course, being close to Mount Hermon in Lebanon.
Yes.
Mount Hermon being the place where the book of Enoch says those fallen angels came down, and that was their point of entry into this world.
The gate of the fallen angels. As a matter of fact, if you want to check a back issue of Prophecy in the News, JR wrote about that very subject 3 months ago.
Well, this forbidden knowledge then that came to early man, which was the subject of metallurgy, how to form metals, how to make instruments of war, which, by the way, was one of the prime reasons, I guess, they came down. They created wars among men. And then there were the roots and herbs. This is a forbidden fruit. I guess they showed men how to make a still and ferment grape juice and what have you. And so all of these things were, in those early days, forbidden, especially the offspring. They destroyed the human genome, and it took Noah, who was perfect in his generations, to repopulate the planet.
JR, there's a bottom line, and Plato writes something fascinating because the Critias comes to an abrupt halt. This is the dialogue concerning Atlantis. And Zeus was very angry. Now, Zeus was the king of the gods, and we don't believe in an actual Zeus, but the Greeks did.
Well, we're talking Satan here, you know.
Yes.
Zeus in Revelation chapter 2 is called Satan.
Absolutely.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
so we do believe in an actual Zeus, if we call him by a different name. The closing words of the Critias, yet inwardly, the people of Atlantis were filled with an unjust lust for possessions and power. But as Zeus, god of the gods, reigning as king according to law, could clearly see this state of affairs, he observed this noble race lying in this abject state and resolved to punish them and to make them more careful and harmonious as a result of their chastisement. And to this end, he called all the gods to their most honored abode, which stands in the middle of the universe and looks down upon all that has a share in generation. And when he had gathered them together, he said, and that's where the manuscript ends.
Oh.
What he said. But the obvious intent is that he was going to punish them by destroying their world. Now, in this respect, Plato agrees with the Bible. This is exactly what we have in Genesis 6, when God looked down on the earth and he saw the abject state to which man had fallen, and he said, it grieves me at my heart that I'm going to have to destroy these people. I submit to you that Plato may have gotten his ideas from the books of Moses,
Yes.
which came long before Plato wrote his dialogues.
Amazing. And yet we have these fallen angels that came down to the earth and gave alien technology, or technology from the other world, this fire, by the way, that does not exist today on planet Earth.
That's correct.
We understand it. And yet, we have some tales of these UFOs that are sighted, that they look like they are alive.
Yes.
So it's some kind of a machine that appears to be alive. Is this the kind of fire that Prometheus stole?
A heavenly fire, if you will. Now, we are besieged with a contemporary mythology. Call it a science fiction mythology, if you will. A flying saucer mythology. It's widely believed that we're being visited by people from other galaxies and so on, and they come down and they flit about, and they never really stop so that you can see them. But there are many, many stories about them, all under the heading of mythology. J.R., I think they're fallen angels. I think they are fallen creatures. They are masquerading as visitors from outer space, but they're the very same people who visited Earth in ages past.
So the big question is, what about modern technology? May I remind you that just a little over 100 years ago, the fastest thing was a 4-footed horse. Isn't that right?
That's true.
So here we have in the last century an absolute explosion of knowledge. And we could not honestly say that it is all upright. There's some alien or forbidden knowledge among them, surely. But I tell you what, Jesus has to be coming back soon, just as the days of Noah were.
Amen.
So trust him today. He's your only hope. This is J.R. Church and Gary Sturman. Until next time, keep looking up.
Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on audio tape, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on videotape.